She was dragged out of the church with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Let's begin. In a small church, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, the atmosphere was heavy with grief. The faint sound of distant sobbing mixed with the rustling of tissues as people gathered to say their final goodbyes to a beloved husband and father. At the front of the church stood a woman in her late 20s, eyes red from hours of weeping. She clutched her baby close to her chest, the tiny infant asleep in her arms, oblivious to the sorrow surrounding them. Her name was Sarah, and her life had been shattered just days ago when her husband, Tom, passed away in a tragic accident. The funeral was supposed to be a moment of closure, a farewell to the man she had loved with all her heart. But what happened next was something she never could have imagined. As the last few guests filed out of the church, two men in dark suits approached Sarah. They spoke in harsh whispers, telling her that it was time to leave. Confused, Sarah tried to stand her ground. "I'm not ready to go yet," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to be here, with him, just a little longer." But the men, with cold, impassive faces, had no intention of listening. One of them reached out, grabbing her by the arm with a force that made her flinch. "You need to leave now," he insisted. "This is not the place for you." Before she could protest, they began pulling her out of the church, ignoring her desperate attempts to resist. In a daze, Sarah stumbled toward the church's entrance, her baby still cradled in her arms. She felt humiliated, helpless, and betrayed. She had just lost her husband, and now it seemed as though she was being cast out of the place where she had hoped to find some solace. As she was dragged onto the church steps, a voice called out to her, sharp and commanding. "Hey, stop right there!" Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the voice. Standing near the church's entrance was a tall man in an expensive suit. His dark eyes locked onto her, with an intensity that made her pause. He took a step forward, his presence undeniable. The men who had been dragging her paused, eyeing him warily. "Who the hell are you?" one of the men demanded, his tone laced with annoyance. The stranger ignored the question and, with a confident stride, moved closer to Sarah. His gaze softened as he looked at her, noticing the exhaustion and fear in her eyes. "Let her go," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. The men hesitated, unsure of how to react to the stranger's calm but commanding demeanor. It was then that Sarah realized who he was. He was the millionaire, the man who owned the entire neighborhood, the man who had everything she and Tom could never afford. And in that moment, she had no idea that his intervention would be the start of a new chapter in her life. A chapter filled with unexpected twists, unthinkable choices, and the possibility of a future she never dared dream of. Asterisk. She was dragged out of the church with her baby, after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk. After the stranger had intervened, the men reluctantly released Sarah from their grip, stepping back as the millionaire approached her. Sarah, still reeling from the shock of being dragged out of the church, looked up at the man who had stopped everything. His eyes were dark, but his expression was soft with concern, something she hadn't expected from someone so wealthy. He stood tall and confident, a stark contrast to the cold, unfeeling men who had just escorted her out. She couldn't understand why he'd stepped in. Was he just being kind, or was there something else behind his actions? "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Sarah nodded, though her heart was still racing, her mind spinning. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure who this man was, or why he'd bothered to help her. I'm fine," she managed, though her voice shook. Her baby stirred in her arms, sensing her distress. The millionaire studied her for a moment before glancing back at the two men who had been forcibly removing her. They stood at a distance now, clearly unsure of how to proceed. "You shouldn't have treated her like that," the man said calmly, his gaze unwavering. "She's just lost her husband." The men didn't reply. They simply turned and walked away, leaving Sarah and the stranger standing alone on the church steps. For a long moment, Sarah couldn't bring herself to speak. She looked down at her baby, still swaddled in the blanket, and a wave of emotion swept over her. She had lost Tom, her husband, her partner, her best friend, and now she was standing in the cold, outside a church, with no one to turn to. Her world had been shattered. The millionaire cleared his throat, breaking her out of her thoughts. "I'm sorry to intrude, but you don't look like you have anywhere to go." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. How could he know? How could he see through her? But there was something in his gaze, something kind but firm, that made her trust him more than she should. She swallowed hard before replying. "I don't. Not anymore." She didn't want to explain her situation. The weight of it all was too much to bear, and the last thing she wanted was for this stranger to feel pity for her. But somehow, he already knew. He seemed to understand without her saying a word. "I'm David Carter," he said, extending his hand. "I know this might sound strange, but if you need help, I can offer you a place to stay." Sarah blinked, surprised by the offer. A place to stay? From a man she had just met? It felt too good to be true. Yet somehow, his calm demeanor made it hard to dismiss. David Carter. The name clicked in her mind, though she hadn't immediately recognized it. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city, a businessman with a reputation that preceded him. She had seen his face on magazine covers, read about him in the news. But why was he offering her help now, in the middle of the street, after what had just happened? "I don't want to be a burden," Sarah said softly, her gaze dropping to the ground. She felt small in that moment, like everything she had known had been stripped away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. "You're not a burden," David said with a reassuring smile. "I'm just offering a helping hand. You don't have to decide anything right now. But if you need someone to talk to or a place to stay, I can help. No strings attached." Sarah hesitated, glancing down at her baby, who was now beginning to wake. She felt torn, unsure of what to do. On one hand, this stranger seemed kind, but on the other, she didn't know if she could trust him. Still, she had nowhere else to turn. Her life was in ruins. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." David smiled, a warmth in his eyes. "I'll arrange for you to stay somewhere comfortable. Just come with me." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward his car. As she followed him, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something she hadn't expected. Something that might change her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. What she didn't know was that this encounter would be the first step on a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her world, and the future she would have. And it would lead her to a place she never could have imagined, into the life of a man who, in a twist of fate, would come to mean more to her than she could have ever anticipated. Asterisk. She was dragged out of the church with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk. After the initial shock of being rescued from the church, Sarah was driven to a lavish mansion on the outskirts of the city. David Carter, the man who had helped her, didn't say much on the way, but his presence was comforting. She sat in the back seat of the car, her baby asleep in her arms, and felt the weight of her grief settle in once again. The world around her was moving forward, but she felt as if she were frozen in time, unable to escape the nightmare that had consumed her life. When they arrived at the mansion, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The house was grand, more than she could ever have imagined. The kind of place she had only seen in magazines. The sprawling estate was surrounded by gardens and high gates, the architecture towering above her. David led her inside with a calm confidence, and as he opened the front door, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with discomfort. She had never been in a place like this, and she certainly didn't belong here. The foyer was vast, with marble floors that gleamed under the chandelier light. The entire house exuded wealth, yet there was something eerily quiet about it. The silence felt cold, even though the space was filled with grandeur. Sarah's heart raced as she followed David through the grand halls, unsure of where to go or what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of life. Her world had always been simple, humble. She had never imagined that a man like David, with his wealth and influence, would offer her a place to stay. "You can stay here for as long as you need," David said, his voice soft as he led her down a hallway. "There's a guest room ready for you, and the staff will make sure you're comfortable." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She still couldn't believe what was happening. Everything had changed so quickly. The funeral, the men who had dragged her out of the church, and now this being offered sanctuary in a place like this. It didn't seem real. David opened a door at the end of the hall, revealing a spacious, beautifully decorated room. The bed was large and plush, with soft linens and a view of the estate's gardens. It was the kind of room Sarah had only dreamed of, but it felt alien to her. "I'll leave you to get settled," David said, giving her a kind smile before walking out of the room and gently closing the door behind him. Sarah stood still for a moment, taking it all in. She could hear the distant hum of the house, the quiet murmurs of staff in other rooms. It felt like a dream, but it was her new reality. As she set the baby down in the crib beside the bed, Sarah felt a deep sense of loneliness wash over her. The baby stirred slightly, but Sarah remained motionless, her thoughts drifting to her late husband, Tom. She missed him so much. He had been her rock, her everything. Now, she was left with only memories and a deep, aching emptiness. What was she supposed to do now? How was she supposed to move on without him? She sank down onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Sarah quickly wiped her tears away and stood up, trying to compose herself. She opened the door to find a staff member standing there with a tray of food. "Mr. Carter thought you might be hungry," the staff member said politely, offering her the tray. Sarah hesitated for a moment, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened, but then she took the tray with a grateful nod. "Thank you," she said softly. As she closed the door and sat down at the small table in the room, she realized that while this was an incredible offer of help, it also came with a heavy price. She wasn't sure if she could ever repay David for what he had done for her, but one thing was clear: her life was no longer her own. She had no choice but to accept the help, to let someone else guide her through this dark period. What she didn't know was that David wasn't just offering her shelter. He was offering her a chance to rebuild her life, but in ways she never expected. The bond between them would grow, and Sarah would soon find herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, choices, and life-changing decisions. Little did she know that David's kindness would lead to a future that neither of them could have predicted. Asterisk, asterisk. She was dragged out of the church, with her baby, after her husband's funeral, until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. The following days in the mansion felt like a strange, surreal dream for Sarah. She couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place, like an intruder in a world that wasn't meant for her. David, despite his kindness, had become a mysterious figure in her life. Every time they spoke, there was something in his eyes that seemed to hint at more than just charity or a simple act of kindness. She couldn't help but wonder why he had chosen to help her, someone he had only just met. As the days passed, Sarah adjusted to the luxury of her new surroundings. The staff treated her with respect, offering her everything she needed, from fresh meals to comfortable accommodations. The baby, now settled into a peaceful routine, seemed to enjoy the calm of the mansion as well. Yet, despite the comfort, Sarah felt the weight of her grief more intensely than ever. She spent most of her time in the guest room, the space too large for just her and her baby. The quiet, though initially soothing, soon became suffocating. She missed her old life, the small apartment she and Tom had shared, the simple, mundane moments that had once brought her so much joy. As she sat by the window one afternoon, looking out at the sprawling gardens below, Sarah was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She turned and saw David standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. "Hey," he said quietly. "I was wondering if you wanted to take a walk with me. I know it's been a tough few days, and I thought you might like some fresh air." Sarah hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to talk to him, or if she could handle another conversation about her loss. But something in his tone, the softness of his words, made her nod. "I think I'd like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Together, they walked through the gardens, the cool breeze lifting the strands of Sarah's hair as they strolled down the path. The flowers in the garden were in full bloom, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray heaviness that weighed down Sarah's heart. As they walked, the silence between them was comfortable, though Sarah couldn't help but feel the need to break it. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "Why help me? You don't even know me." David glanced over at her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't need to know you to want to help. No one should have to go through what you're going through. And honestly, I've been in a situation before where someone reached out to me when I needed it most. I guess I just wanted to pay that forward." Sarah felt a pang of something gratitude, maybe, mixed with confusion. But why me? There are so many others who need help. People who've been through worse. Why me? David stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Because," he said slowly, "I see something in you, something that's been broken, yes, but still strong. You have this resilience, Sarah. I think you don't give yourself enough credit for that." His words took her by surprise, and for a moment, Sarah could only stare at him, unsure of how to respond. She had never thought of herself as strong. She felt weak, shattered by the loss of Tom, by the life she had been forced to leave behind. But somehow, David's words made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she thought. "I don't know what to do with my life now," she admitted, her voice raw. "Everything's changed. I don't even know where to start." David smiled gently, his eyes softening. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. It's okay to take things one step at a time. Just give yourself permission to grieve, to heal, and when you're ready, the rest will come." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she nodded. She had always been the one who took care of things, who held everything together. But now, with Tom gone, she didn't know how to hold herself together. As they continued their walk, Sarah realized that while she didn't have all the answers, maybe she didn't need to have them right now. Maybe it was enough to just take each day as it came, to let herself heal at her own pace. And maybe, with David's help, she would eventually find a way forward, a new life in the midst of the pain. As they walked back toward the mansion, Sarah felt a small, unexpected sense of hope stir inside her. For the first time in days, she wasn't just overwhelmed by grief. There was a glimmer of something else, a possibility, and that possibility was enough to keep her going. Asterisk, asterisk, she was dragged out of the church with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself settling into a strange new routine. She woke up each morning in the guest room of David's mansion, where the silence was often broken only by the sound of the wind rustling the leaves outside. Despite the luxury that surrounded her, Sarah couldn't help but feel a constant ache in her chest. She had lost her husband, and though David's offer of help was kind, it didn't fill the emptiness she felt inside. David had continued to check in on her, offering comfort and reassurance. But every time they spoke, Sarah found herself retreating further into herself. The world outside felt like it was moving on, but she was stuck, frozen in her grief. One afternoon, as Sarah sat by the window, holding her baby and watching the rain fall outside, she heard a soft knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, so when she opened the door, she was surprised to see David standing there, holding a small envelope in his hand. "Hey," he said with a warm smile. "I wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing. I also have something for you." He handed her the envelope and Sarah took it, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. David shrugged, a playful glint in his eyes. "Just something I thought you might like. Open it." Sarah tore open the envelope and found a small card inside, along with a gift card to a local art supply store. She looked up at him, confused. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would you give me this?" David's smile softened, and he stepped closer to her. "I remember you saying once that you wanted to open your own art studio," he said gently. "I thought maybe this would help you get started. You've been through so much, Sarah. You don't have to figure everything out right away, but maybe this could be a first step." Sarah stared at the gift card, a wave of emotions crashing over her. It had been years since she had even thought about her dreams of becoming an artist. She had put those dreams aside when she had married Tom, choosing instead to focus on their family and the life they were building together. But now, with Tom gone, it felt as though she had been given a chance, an opportunity to pursue something she had long buried. I don't know what to say," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. She had never expected this, especially not from David. He barely knew her, yet here he was, offering her a chance to start over. "You don't have to say anything," David replied softly. "But I want you to know that I believe in you. You're stronger than you think, Sarah. I've seen it in the way you care for your baby, in the way you handle everything that's been thrown at you. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life, however you see fit." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, her life wasn't over. Maybe there was still a future for her, one where she could reclaim the dreams she had once let go of. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can ever repay you for all that you've done." David shook his head. "You don't have to. Just take this time to heal. If you ever need anything, I'm here. No pressure. Just take it one day at a time." Sarah nodded, wiping away the tears that had fallen down her cheeks. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since Tom's death, she felt like there might be a way forward. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but with David's support and the possibility of rebuilding her life, she felt like she could begin again. As she looked at the art supply store gift card in her hand, Sarah realized that this was the first real step toward reclaiming her happiness, a step toward finding herself again in the midst of the pain. And though the journey would be long, she now had the courage to take it, one small step at a time. Asterisk. She was dragged out of the church with her baby, after her husband's funeral, until a millionaire. Asterisk. The days that followed Sarah's unexpected gift from David were a blur of emotions. The card for the art supplies sat on her desk, a constant reminder of a dream she had abandoned long ago. But each time she glanced at it, something stirred inside her, a feeling of hope that she hadn't felt since before Tom passed away. One morning, Sarah decided to take the first step toward rebuilding. She had always loved painting, but after Tom's accident, she hadn't touched a brush. Now, with David's kindness pushing her forward, she decided to visit the art supply store. The walk there was long, but Sarah didn't mind. The fresh air felt good, and as she walked through the quiet streets, she allowed herself to think about something other than her grief. When she finally arrived at the store, Sarah stood at the door for a moment, hesitating. She hadn't been in a place like this in years. The smell of fresh paint and brushes filled the air as she stepped inside, the sight of endless supplies overwhelming yet exciting. She wandered through the aisles, picking up a few paints, brushes, and a sketchbook, things she could use to start over. As she checked out, the cashier gave her a friendly smile. "Looks like you're starting something new," she said, glancing at the items Sarah had chosen. Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't felt in a long time. "I guess so," she replied softly, though her mind was still racing with uncertainty. Back at the mansion, Sarah found herself sitting at the desk in her room, surrounded by the art supplies she had just bought. She set the sketchbook in front of her and picked up a pencil. Her hand trembled as she drew the first line, but something about the act felt liberating. She wasn't sure what she was drawing, but that didn't matter. It felt good to create again. For hours, Sarah lost herself in the art, the world outside fading away. The pain she had been carrying for so long seemed to lessen with each stroke, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace. As the evening approached, she heard a soft knock on the door. It was David. "How's it going?" he asked, stepping inside. Sarah looked up from her sketchbook, surprised. I think it's going well," she said, her voice uncertain but hopeful. "It's been a while since I did something like this." David smiled, his eyes soft. "I'm glad to hear that. You deserve to have something for yourself, Sarah." There was a pause before he spoke again, his voice gentle. "I wanted to let you know that I'm here for you. Not just because of everything you've been through, but because I care about you. I know things haven't been easy, but I believe you're stronger than you think." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had known David's help had come from a place of kindness, but this was different. There was an honesty in his words, a sincerity she hadn't expected. She swallowed hard, feeling emotions swell within her. "Thank you, David," she whispered, unable to find the right words to express how much his support meant to her. David stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I'm just doing what I feel is right. You don't have to figure everything out right away, but you don't have to do it alone either." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and confusion. She wasn't sure where this connection between her and David was leading, but she couldn't deny the way his presence made her feel seen, understood, and cared for. "I don't know what the future holds," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'm willing to try, for myself, for my baby." David smiled warmly, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "That's all anyone can do. Take it one day at a time." As he turned to leave, Sarah felt a small but powerful shift inside her. It wasn't just about painting or pursuing old dreams, it was about finding a way forward, even if she didn't have all the answers. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. And with David's support, maybe that hope was enough to guide her through the uncertainty. Asterisk, asterisk, she was dragged out of the church, with her baby, after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. Sarah's life had slowly begun to shift since the day David had handed her the art supply store gift card. She spent her days working on her sketches, painting with a passion she thought she had lost forever. Yet there was still a lingering sense of guilt that weighed on her heart. She couldn't help but feel that she was moving forward without Tom. The life they had planned together felt like a distant dream, one that was now slipping away. David noticed the change in Sarah. He could see the glimmer of hope returning in her eyes, the way her face lit up when she talked about her art, but there was still something holding her back. He knew that healing wasn't just about time, but also about confronting the past. One evening, as they sat in the drawing room, the fire crackling softly in the background, David decided to speak up. "Sarah, I've noticed something," he began, his voice gentle. "You've come so far in such a short time, but I can tell there's something still bothering you. I don't want to push, but I think you need to face it, for your own sake." Sarah looked at him, her heart pounding. She had always admired David's calm, steady demeanor, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to talk about her pain. She had spent so much of her life burying her emotions, putting up walls to protect herself from the hurt. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor. David reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she met his gaze. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, Sarah. You don't have to carry this weight on your own anymore." For the first time since Tom's death, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been so afraid of confronting the reality of her loss, but maybe David was right. Maybe it was time to let go of the pain that had been holding her back. Taking a deep breath, Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been pretending that everything's fine," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not. I miss Tom so much, and I feel like I'm betraying him by moving on, like I'm forgetting him." David's expression softened, and he took her hand in his. "You're not forgetting him, Sarah. You're honoring his memory by finding a way to live again. He would want you to be happy, to chase your dreams, and to love again. You don't have to feel guilty for that." Sarah blinked back tears, feeling the weight in her chest begin to lift. "But how do I move on without feeling like I'm leaving him behind?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David gave her a small smile, squeezing her hand. "You move on by living, by being kind to yourself, by allowing yourself to heal, bit by bit, even if it's hard. And when you're ready, you'll see that you haven't left him behind. You've carried him with you, in your heart, in the way you live your life." Sarah nodded, the tears finally falling freely. She wasn't sure if she believed it all just yet, but for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again. Maybe David was right. Maybe it was time to stop carrying the guilt and start living. The next few weeks were a turning point for Sarah. With David's encouragement, she began to open up more, allowing herself to grieve without fear of judgment. She still had moments of doubt, but each time she picked up her paintbrush, she felt a little lighter. One afternoon, as Sarah was sitting in the garden, lost in her art, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to see David walking toward her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I was thinking," he began, "I know you've been focused on your art, but I also think you're ready for the next step. What if we made your art public? You've got something incredible here, Sarah, and I think people would appreciate it." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had never considered showing her art to the world, afraid that it wouldn't be good enough. But David's belief in her made her hesitate, just for a moment. "You think people would want to see my work?" she asked, uncertainty in her voice. David smiled, his eyes warm. I know they would. You have a gift, Sarah, and you deserve to share it. That was all it took. Sarah found herself taking a deep breath and smiling back at David. She didn't know what the future held, but with David's encouragement, she was ready to take the next step. She wasn't just moving on from her grief, she was beginning to live again, to pursue the dreams she had put on hold for so long. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could embrace her past while building a future she never thought possible. Asterisk, asterisk. She was dragged out of the church with her baby, after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. Weeks passed, and Sarah's life began to slowly change. With every brushstroke, she found herself shedding layers of grief she never thought she could bear. David's unwavering support helped her open up to the world again, even though she wasn't completely healed. She had come a long way from the devastated woman who had been dragged out of the church just a short time ago. But there was still something lingering in the back of her mind, the idea that she wasn't truly ready to let go of the past. One morning, as Sarah was sipping her coffee in the mansion's kitchen, David walked in, looking more serious than usual. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong?" she asked, her mind racing. David sat down across from her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pause. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "I've been thinking a lot about how far you've come, Sarah, and I think you're ready for a bigger step. There's a project I'm working on, and I believe you could be a part of it." Sarah raised an eyebrow, confused. "A project? What kind of project?" David smiled, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. "It's a new charity initiative, something that could help a lot of people, and I want you to be the one to lead it." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "Lead it? Why me?" "I'm still figuring things out." David leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Because I believe in you. You've been through so much, and you're still standing. Your strength, your talent, these are things people need to see. You have a way of inspiring others, Sarah. You've already made such a difference in your own life. Why not use that to help others?" Sarah was silent for a moment, processing his words. She had never considered herself someone who could lead, especially not after everything she had lost. But something in David's confidence made her pause. Was she ready to take that step? Could she truly help others while still carrying her own pain? She glanced at her baby, who was peacefully playing nearby, and felt a rush of emotion. She had to be strong for her child, for herself, and for others who were struggling. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice unsure. "What if I fail? What if I can't do it?" David reached out, placing a hand over hers. "Failure is part of the journey. You've already overcome so much, Sarah. You've shown strength I never thought I'd see in someone who's been through so much loss. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Take the step, and we'll figure it out together." His words resonated deep inside her. She had been so focused on the fear of failure that she hadn't considered the possibility of success. Maybe this was the opportunity she needed to move forward, to stop living in the shadows of her past and embrace the future. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." David smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I knew you'd say yes. You won't regret this, Sarah. You're going to do great things." The next few days were filled with meetings, plans, and a growing sense of excitement Sarah hadn't expected. She had started to pull her life back together, but this project felt like something entirely different. It wasn't just about moving forward anymore, it was about giving back, helping others find hope the way David had given her hope. As the project began to take shape, Sarah found herself stepping into a role she had never envisioned for herself. She organized events, reached out to people in need, and used her art as a tool to connect with others. Slowly, the people she helped began to see her not as a woman lost in grief, but as a woman who had found her purpose. She wasn't just Sarah, the widow, anymore. She was Sarah, the woman who had rebuilt herself and was now rebuilding the lives of others. Despite the challenges she faced, Sarah's belief in herself began to grow. She started to feel like she was not just moving on from her grief, but using it to fuel the change she wanted to see in the world. And as she worked alongside David, she began to see him in a new light. His kindness and generosity had been a lifeline for her. But now, she saw something deeper, something more than just the man who had helped her after the loss of her husband. Slowly, over time, Sarah's feelings for David began to shift. She had no idea where this journey would lead. But she knew one thing for certain: she was no longer just existing in the aftermath of her pain. She was living, creating, and changing the world around her, one step at a time. Asterisk, asterisk. She was dragged out of the church with her baby, after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. As the weeks passed, Sarah's life continued to transform in ways she hadn't anticipated. The charity project she had taken on had become a passion, and with each new step, she found herself growing stronger, more confident. She was no longer just the woman who had lost everything. She was now the woman who was rebuilding her life, brick by brick. But as Sarah's work grew, so did the pressure. The more successful the project became, the more people began to rely on her. There were moments of doubt, moments when Sarah questioned whether she was truly capable of leading this initiative. But David's unwavering support continued to remind her of her potential. One day, as Sarah sat at her desk, going over plans for an upcoming fundraiser, she received an unexpected phone call. It was from her mother-in-law, Helen. "Sarah, we need to talk." Helen's voice crackled through the phone. There was an edge to her tone that Sarah couldn't quite place. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "It's about the house," Helen said, her voice tense. "I've been thinking about the estate, and I think we need to settle things. The lawyers are pushing us to make decisions." Sarah froze. The house. It was the last connection she had to Tom, the last piece of their life together. The thought of losing it made her heart race. I don't know if I'm ready for that," Sarah whispered. "I don't think I can let go of it yet." "You need to, Sarah. It's time," Helen insisted. "You can't keep holding on to the past. You have a child to think about now. You need to move forward." The words cut deep, and Sarah felt the familiar pang of grief rise in her chest. For so long, she had clung to the memories of Tom, to the life they had planned. But now, it seemed as though everything was pulling her in a new direction, one that didn't include him. "I'll think about it," Sarah said quietly, trying to steady her breathing. "But I need some time." After hanging up, Sarah sat in silence, the weight of the conversation settling over her. The house. The memories. The life she had once shared with Tom. It was all slipping away, and it was terrifying. As she gazed out the window, her mind racing, David entered the room, sensing her distress. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Sarah turned to him, her eyes welling up with tears. "It's my mother-in-law," she began, her voice shaking. "She wants me to sell the house. She says it's time to move on, but I don't know if I can." David sat down next to her, his hand gently resting on hers. "I understand how hard this is," he said softly. "But Sarah, holding on to the past isn't going to bring Tom back. You've built something incredible here, and you deserve to have a future. You deserve to make new memories, ones that are just as meaningful." Sarah wiped away a tear, looking up at him. "I don't want to forget him," she whispered. "I feel like if I let go of everything, I'll be forgetting him. I don't know how to move on without feeling like I'm betraying him." David squeezed her hand, his voice firm yet compassionate. "You're not betraying him, Sarah. You're honoring him by living. He would want you to be happy, to build a life for yourself and your child. You don't have to forget the past, but you don't have to live in it either." His words resonated with her, but the thought of letting go of Tom's memory still felt unbearable. She had spent so much time trying to hold on to the life they had built, and now it seemed like everything was slipping through her fingers. But as Sarah sat there with David, she realized he was right. She couldn't keep clinging to the past. She had a future to build, a future that included her son, her art, and the people who cared for her, like David. She wasn't alone anymore. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I'll try," Sarah said finally, her voice soft but determined. "I'll let go of the house, and I'll move forward. For Tom, and for me." David smiled. His eyes filled with pride. "You're doing more than just moving forward, Sarah. You're creating something new, and that's the best way to honor the past, to live fully in the present." That evening, after the conversation with David, Sarah made the decision. She would begin the process of letting go of the house. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a step she needed to take. The house would always hold memories of Tom, but those memories would remain in her heart, not in the walls of the home they had once shared. As she looked out the window, Sarah finally felt the weight of her grief begin to lift. Just a little. She had a long way to go, but she was no longer afraid to move forward. She was ready to start the next chapter of her life, a chapter where she could embrace the future without losing the love she had for the past. She was dragged out of the church with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. After the decision to let go of the house, Sarah felt a strange sense of relief, as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Yet, as the days passed, doubt began to creep in. The thought of parting with the home she had shared with Tom still gnawed at her, but deep down, she knew it was the right choice. She had spent so long living in the past that she had nearly forgotten what it felt like to move forward. The charity project continued to flourish, and Sarah found herself not only leading the initiative but also inspiring others along the way. However, a shadow of uncertainty still loomed over her, especially when it came to her relationship with David. He had always been there for her, offering support and encouragement when she needed it most. But now, as she found herself growing stronger, she couldn't help but wonder about the nature of their bond. Were they just friends? Or was there something more? One evening, after a long day of planning a new event for the charity, Sarah found herself sitting alone in the drawing room, reflecting on the changes in her life. The mansion was quiet, and the flickering candlelight seemed to make the space feel even more vast and empty. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see David standing there, his usual calm expression now mixed with a hint of concern. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Sarah gestured to the chair across from her. "Of course," she replied, forcing a smile. As David settled into the chair, there was a brief silence between them. Sarah could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging in the air. David, sensing her unease, spoke first. "I've noticed something, Sarah," he began, his voice gentle but serious. "You've been holding back, and I'm not sure if you even realize it." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to notice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "I can see it in the way you're always giving, always taking care of others. But when it comes to yourself, you're still holding on to something. You've made so much progress, but I can tell there's a part of you that's still unsure. Are you ever going to let yourself truly heal?" Sarah swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. She had spent so much time focusing on the charity, on helping others, that she hadn't allowed herself the space to process everything she had gone through. She had buried her grief under layers of responsibility and guilt. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I don't know if I can. I feel like if I let go, I'll forget him. I'll forget Tom." David reached across the table, gently placing his hand on hers. "You won't forget him, Sarah. He's a part of you. But you can't keep living in the past, trapped by the grief. You deserve more than that. You deserve to live fully, to embrace the future without being haunted by the past." His words echoed in her mind, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stop holding herself back. She had spent so long trying to protect herself from the pain, but she now realized that it was that very pain that was keeping her from healing. "I don't know how to do that," Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. David's hand tightened around hers, his gaze soft yet firm. "I know it's not easy, but I'm here, Sarah. I've been here all along, and I'll keep being here. You don't have to do it alone." As the words sank in, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. David wasn't just offering her comfort, he was offering her the freedom to let go of her guilt, to stop living in the shadow of her grief. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long began to feel a little lighter. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky but sincere. "I don't know what I would do without you." David smiled, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do. You're not alone, Sarah, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hung in the air between them, filled with meaning, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was starting to live again. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but with David by her side, She knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. The road to healing would take time. But now, for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt ready to take that first step into the future. Asterisk, asterisk. She was dragged out of the church, with her baby after her husband's funeral, until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk. The weeks following Sarah's breakthrough were filled with steady progress. She had started to heal, not just through her work but through her own willingness to face the past. The charity project she had taken on had grown significantly, and Sarah was starting to see the impact she was making. But with her growing confidence, a new challenge appeared. The pressure to balance her responsibilities began to take its toll. She felt torn between the demands of her work, her healing process, and her new relationship with David. One day, as Sarah sat in her studio, working on a piece for an upcoming exhibit, she received a phone call from her lawyer. The tone of his voice immediately caught her attention. "Sarah, we need to discuss the house. The paperwork is ready for you to sign, and we need to settle this matter soon." She felt a lump form in her throat. She had been avoiding this moment for so long, but now it was here. The decision to part with the house Tom and she had shared was looming. It was the last tie to their life together, and the idea of letting go still felt like a betrayal. She had been through so much already, but the finality of signing the papers seemed overwhelming. As she hung up the phone, she sat in silence, staring at the artwork in front of her. The colors and shapes on the canvas seemed to mock her uncertainty. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. David entered, his face filled with concern. "Hey, how's it going?" he asked, walking toward her. "Is everything okay?" Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with doubt and sadness. "It's the house," she said quietly. "The lawyer just called. They want me to sign the papers. It's time to let it go." David sat down beside her, his expression gentle. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this. You've made so much progress, Sarah. You've done things I didn't think were possible. And letting go of the house doesn't mean you're forgetting Tom. It just means you're letting yourself live." Sarah wiped away a tear, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't about forgetting, it was about healing, about moving forward. But as much as she wanted to believe it, there was still a part of her that couldn't let go. "I'm scared, David," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I feel like if I do this, I'll lose him forever." David reached out, his hand covering hers. "You won't lose him, Sarah. He's a part of who you are, and that will never change. You're not dishonoring his memory by moving on. You're honoring it by living the life you deserve." His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of her doubts. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. She knew he was right. The pain of loss would never fully disappear, but she couldn't keep clinging to the past. Not if she wanted to give herself the chance to heal. "Okay," she whispered, her voice filled with a new sense of determination. "I'll sign the papers." David smiled, his eyes full of pride. "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You're stronger than you realize." The next day, Sarah met with her lawyer to finalize the paperwork. As she signed the documents, the weight of the decision hit her, but there was also a sense of release. The house would no longer be hers, but the memories of Tom, the love they had shared, would remain in her heart. It was time to let go. That evening, as Sarah sat in her studio, she looked at the painting she had been working on for the exhibit. It was her most personal piece yet, a reflection of her journey, a journey from grief to healing, from loss to love. It was her story, told through color and form, and in that moment, she realized that she wasn't just healing for herself. She was healing for her son, for her future, and for the people she was helping through her charity. She wasn't just living in the past anymore. She was building something new, something beautiful. And as she picked up her brush and continued to paint, Sarah knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but it was a road she was now ready to walk. With David by her side and the support of those who believed in her, she could face whatever came next. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt ready to embrace it. Asterisk, asterisk, she was dragged out of the church with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire. Asterisk, asterisk, the decision to move forward was never an easy one for Sarah. But in the days after signing the papers to sell the house, something inside her shifted. It was as if a weight had been lifted. though the emptiness of the decision still lingered. But Sarah wasn't just moving forward for herself anymore. She was doing it for her son, for the future that awaited her beyond the sorrow. The charity project continued to thrive. Her art was gaining recognition, and slowly, the pieces of her life were starting to fit together again. Yet, despite all the progress, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She had rebuilt so much, but there was still one thing left, unsettled her growing feelings for David. Over time, he had become more than just a friend or a supporter. He was her anchor, her constant in a sea of change. But she wasn't sure how to handle these feelings. She had spent so long trying to heal from the loss of Tom, and the idea of opening her heart to someone else seemed impossible. One evening, as Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her mind swirling with uncertainty, David walked in, looking as composed as ever. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "How are you doing? You seem a little distant." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with hesitation. "I'm fine," she replied, though her tone didn't match her words. David took a step closer, his gaze steady. "I don't think you are," he said quietly. "You've been carrying something for a while now, and I can see it. I don't want to push, but I think it's time we talked about it." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had been avoiding this conversation for so long, unsure of how to even begin. "David," she started, her voice shaking slightly, "I've been through so much. I've tried to move on, but sometimes it feels like I'm betraying Tom. I know that's not logical, but it's how I feel. And now, with you," her voice trailed off as she struggled to find the right words. David sat down across from her, his expression understanding, but his eyes were full of concern. "You don't have to feel guilty for wanting to be happy, Sarah," he said gently. "You've been through so much pain, and you deserve to feel joy again. I care about you, and I'm here for you, no matter what, but you have to decide what you want." Sarah's heart raced. She had always admired David for his kindness, his patience, and his unwavering support. But now, she saw him differently. She wasn't just grateful for him. She was beginning to care for him in a way that went beyond friendship. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered, her voice full of vulnerability. "I'm not sure if I can love again." David reached out, taking her hand in his. "I'm not asking you to rush into anything, Sarah," he said softly. "I'm here for you, no matter what. I care about you, and I want to be there for you, through everything, but you have to decide when you're ready to let someone in." His words hung in the air. A promise. A commitment. Sarah looked down at their intertwined hands, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone anymore. David had shown her what it meant to heal, to embrace life again, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to take the next step. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to be alone forever. I want to be able to open up, to let someone in. And I think I'm ready to try." David smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Sarah's heart flutter. "You don't have to do it all at once," he said. "We can take it one day at a time. Whatever you need, I'm here." As the days passed, Sarah allowed herself to open up to David in ways she hadn't thought possible. Their connection deepened, but she didn't rush it. For the first time in years, she was allowing herself to be vulnerable, to trust again. David's presence was a constant reminder that life could still hold beauty, even after so much pain. Together, they created something new, something beautiful, a future built on healing, trust, and the promise of what was yet to come. Sarah knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But with David by her side, she felt ready to face them. The past was always going to be a part of her, but she was no longer letting it define her. She was building a new life, one step at a time, and the future was beginning to look brighter than she could have ever imagined. Asterisk, she was dragged out of the church, with her baby after her husband's funeral, until a millionaire. Asterisk. The days turned into weeks, and Sarah found herself finally embracing the life she had been building with the help of David. The healing process, though slow, had gained momentum. She had let go of the house, and with it, the constant weight of the past. She had also opened her heart, allowing David into a space that had been sealed for so long. It wasn't just the charity project that kept her busy anymore. It was a new sense of purpose that filled her life. Sarah's art was blossoming, her charity events were being well received, and she was even gaining recognition in the community. Still, despite everything she had achieved, a part of her heart longed for the future to be clearer, for the next chapter of her life to unfold in front of her. That was until one fateful evening when everything seemed to come together. It was the night of the Grand Charity Gala, an event that had been in the works for months. Sarah had poured her heart and soul into the event, and it had all come down to this moment. The ballroom was filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. The guests, a mix of business tycoons, philanthropists, and influential figures, mingled and admired the artwork displayed throughout the room. Sarah stood at the center of the event, feeling both exhilarated and overwhelmed. She had come so far, and yet there was one last step to take. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for David. When she finally found him, he was standing near the stage, watching her with a proud smile. As if sensing her gaze, he walked over to her. "You did it," David said, his voice full of admiration. "This is incredible, Sarah." Sarah smiled, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "It's not just me, though. It's everyone who believed in me, who helped me get here. I couldn't have done it alone." David shook his head, his smile never fading. "You've always had it in you, Sarah. You just needed someone to remind you of that." Sarah felt her heart swell with gratitude, and a quiet warmth settled between them. But there was still a question lingering in her mind, one that had been growing ever since she had opened her heart to David. "David," she began, her voice hesitant, "what happens after tonight? After all this is over?" David's eyes softened as he took a step closer to her. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice full of sincerity. "I mean, where do we go from here?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "This, what we have, how does it fit into everything that's happening in our lives?" David paused, as if considering her question carefully. The noise of the event seemed to fade as he took her hands in his, looking into her eyes. "What happens next is up to us," he said gently. "You've come so far, Sarah, and I've seen you grow into someone who doesn't just survive but thrives. I think we're both ready for whatever comes next, together." Sarah felt a rush of emotion flood through her. This moment, this connection was everything she had been searching for. She wasn't alone anymore, and with David, she didn't have to be afraid of what the future might hold. As they stood there, hand in hand, the music and chatter from the gala felt distant. The room seemed to fade, and for a brief moment, it was just the two of them. Sarah realized that she had spent so long looking back at the past she couldn't change, but now she was standing in a future she could shape. "Together," she echoed softly, a smile spreading across her face. David smiled back, his eyes filled with warmth and love. "Together," he repeated. As the night continued and the gala went on, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. She had finally embraced the future, no longer trapped by grief or the past. She had found a new purpose, new hope, and most importantly, a new love. The road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but Sarah was no longer afraid of facing them. With David by her side, she was ready to take on whatever life threw her way. And as the evening drew to a close, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of something even more beautiful. The journey had been long, but the future was now hers to create. Together with David, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. I'm sharing a touching and inspirational journey through a series of millionaire stories that follow a woman's remarkable transformation after losing her husband. She is unexpectedly saved from a challenging situation by a millionaire. And as their relationship develops, she embarks on a path of self-discovery, healing, and building a new future. These millionaire stories not only showcase the emotional depth of loss and recovery, but also highlight the power of kindness, resilience, and second chances. The narrative explores how an encounter with a millionaire leads to a series of life-changing events, where the protagonist starts to rebuild her life with the help of this unexpected benefactor. As the story unfolds, she navigates the emotional challenges of letting go of the past, facing her fears, and embracing the future with confidence and love. These millionaire stories are a reminder that the most significant transformations often come from the most unexpected sources, and that with the right support, anyone can overcome hardship. Follow this incredible journey through a series of millionaire stories that highlight the power of personal growth, love, and the ability to create a new beginning. The twist of fate in these millionaire stories will inspire you to believe in the possibility of new beginnings, even after the most challenging of times.